Sometimes when the world's not on your side, you don't know where to run to, you don't know where to hide. You gaze at the stars in the sky, at the mountain so high, through the tears in your eyes, looking for a reason to replace what is gone. Just remember, remember that you are never alone.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi to all our viewers all around the world. You guys smile, that's right, smile, don't be sad, and welcome to our all new program, Don't Be Sad. I'm joined by the host of previous programs on Huda TV, which were of great benefit to the viewers, and inshallah ta'ala we hope this one will be as beneficial as those previous programs, which were, of course, if you remember, the power of dhikr, as well as do your part. Of course, I'm talking about our brother all the way from Newcastle, England, brother Muhammad Tim Humble. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Well, thank you, brother, for allowing me to host your program. Indeed, this is your show, and I'm very honored to be here with you. And my first question for you, before you lay out what this show is what issues you're going to address, why did you choose this topic, brother? Because there are a lot of serious topics going on in politics in the Middle East, or as a graduate of Medina, perhaps you could have chose some theoretical topics, more scientific topics, I suppose we can say. So why would you pick this topic, Don't Be Sad?
I think that there are a number of reasons. I think first of all, it's very important to have a nice mix of theoretical and practical topics. I think that when you have purely theory, people sometimes find it very difficult to implement in their lives, very difficult to find ways to actually live the knowledge that they get. And I think that we are living in what is by all admission a very difficult time for many people. I think on an individual level it's extremely difficult for people. On a collective level in the society, many people, societies are going through change, going through difficulties and troubles. So I think we have to address that in a very practical way, and we have to do so by tying that into the Book of Allah and to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to provide an Islamic solution to the problems that people are facing.
Which sounds wonderful, something practical, something that people can apply in their daily lives, as opposed to just something that's in the world of theory. Here's a tough question that I like to ask our respected scholars of Islam, and those of us who have studied, those of the people who have studied. Is it valid to be depressed? Many of us are experiencing some sort of depression, unhappiness. At the same time, we do consider ourselves practicing Muslims. So how can we reconcile these two? You feel if you're depressed somehow that you're not grateful to Allah. So how can we reconcile this in our minds?
I think there's no doubt that we have to aim to be content with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees for us. And this is something that insha'Allah ta'ala we're going to dedicate a specific episode to, how to achieve contentment with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees. And I think that's a fundamental part of Islam and a fundamental part of our belief as Muslims. However, we also have to recognize, and I think this is going to be a key theme throughout the series, that we as human beings fall short. We aren't perfect, we make mistakes, and we don't always manage to meet the high standards that we set for ourselves. And this is mentioned in some of the ahadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, the hadith in which he said, "Istaqimu walan tuhsu." Stand firm upon Islam, be firm and strong upon Islam, but you'll not be able to do so perfectly.
Right.
So I think we have to be aware as Muslims that whatever the ideal may be, and perhaps the ideal may be that we would never be depressed and we would never feel down about what Allah Azza wa Jal decreed for us, and that's an ideal that we aim for and aspire to. We also have to realize that we're not expected and we're not aiming to achieve, or we're not able to achieve perfection in all of those things. And we are going to go through times when we are sad, we're going to go through times when we feel down. And this is mentioned in the Qur'an with reference to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Allah Azza wa Jal tells him not to be sad about those people who disbelieved, those people who turned away from the message. So I think there's a certain amount of that is natural. However, we have to try to understand what the limits are, and to try to understand how we can control it and how we can turn that sadness and maybe that depression that some people are feeling into a positive and into something by which they can get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Well, wonderful point, Sheikh. And this topic is an interesting one, and I'm glad that you chose to address this topic. Actually, recently I was online, and I did discover there's a website run by the American Association for Anxiety Disorder, I believe, and they discussed anxiety disorders in 2014. They bring stats in 2013, excuse me, and also they look at depression, suicide, bipolar disorder. Now, there are high levels of these more than in Western Europe and in America, in developed countries, more so than in developing countries. So, brother, as someone who resides in the West, do you think there's a link between an increased rate and percentage of people suffering from anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, depression, suicide rates, with lack of spirituality?
I do think so. I think that if we look at the West as a whole, and really I only speak about England very specifically, we see a move away from spirituality in general, an absolute move away from spirituality towards atheism and agnosticism, away from any form of organized religion. So what we find is, because of that lack of spirituality, and of course the most significant part of that is a lack of Islam.
Right.
You see that people don't have any means to achieve true peace and tranquility and happiness in themselves.
Oh, certainly. So certainly without any kind of connection to the Creator, we would think that this would result in some sort of depression, anxiety, sadness, and this is indeed what the figures are showing us. Now you title this program is directed to mainly Muslims, and you title it Don't Be Sad. So there is a valid reason why somebody might be sad. So in this series, in these episodes, you want to dictate, you want to enumerate and help explain to people it is a natural course, part of life rather, to be sad. However, Allah has given us some tools in the Quran and Sunnah to elevate us out of the sadness. Is this one point that you would also like to make in the series?
I think so. I'd like to certainly make the point that Allah Azza wa Jal has made this world a place of tests and trials. And He hasn't made it a place of peace and tranquility and happiness in general for the Muslims. Even though there may be some non-Muslims who do experience that, they often experience it by means or by way of a punishment, in the sense that Allah Azza wa Jal takes them away from religion by giving them that peace and tranquility.
Certainly, yeah, good point.
Otherwise, for the Muslims, this is meant to be a place of tests and trials, and it's meant to be a place of difficulty. And so, naturally, with that difficulty, there are going to be times when you handle it better than others, and there are going to be times when you don't handle it so well. And sometimes we need to help people, and indeed we need to, if you like, direct people towards the elements of the Quran and Sunnah that help people to overcome those hurdles that they will experience, and all of us will experience them in our lives. How to overcome those hurdles, how to get past them, and how to make sure that the next time something comes around, we deal with it in a better way. And we get something positive out of the negative that has been, put in front of us.
And that's a great point, isn't it, brother? That's a wonderful point that you made, because indeed we will all experience some obstacles and challenges and hardships in our life. The difference between the strong believer and the one of weak faith, perhaps, is how that person deals with that before and after. Isn't that right?
Definitely. I mean, if you look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ in general, and we'll probably talk about this or keep coming back to this throughout the series, we see that he was tried with trial after trial and after trial, and difficulty and hardship after hardship. And in fact, it wasn't until the very end of his life that these hardships began to tail off, and the situation for the society improved and stabilized. And in fact, that stabilization of the society was a sign of the end of his prophethood. Hence why when the surah was revealed, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, when the victory comes from Allah and the conquest, this was taken by the companions to mean that this would be the end of his life. Because when his difficulties and hardships finished and ended, that was the meaning that he had no more job to do.
The doors were open now.
The doors were open, people were coming into Islam in crowds, and that means that his life was going to end. And they took it as a surah of sadness, and something which was telling of the end of his life, and not something which was celebrating, a victory which was going to lead to victory after victory after victory, but something which meant that his life was ending. So we're going to endure trials and tribulations, but what matters is how we deal with them.
Wonderful. Okay.
And I guess as well we can add to that these trials and tribulations can be in good and bad. And I think inshallah we will touch upon that in an episode, that not every test that Allah gives you is to do with losing something or failing in something.
That's a good point. So we assume that we're tested with something that we perceive as negative. My car was stolen, I failed the test, I lost my job. But what you're saying, Sheikh, perhaps Allah may test us with something that we perceive to be good.
I think what we're saying is that every single thing that Allah gives you or puts in your way, whether it's good or bad, whether you perceive it to be good or bad, is a test.
Okay.
So for example, wealth is as much of a test as poverty.
SubhanAllah, right.
And if we want to link that to sadness and depression, there are many very wealthy people who are horrendously, terribly depressed.
Certainly.
And very, very, and I mean, you only have to look at the West in general and look at, suicide among famous people,
athletes,
rich people, actors, the likes of these individuals. And you see that there are some people who have materially everything that a person could wish for, and they're incredibly depressed.
And what is the answer to, how can we reconcile that? The answer is,
I mean, first of all, we recognize as Muslims, taking away from that, we recognize as Muslims that our tests are in everything we're given, the good and the bad. So wealth is as much of a test as poverty, health is as much of a test as sickness, and life is as much of a test as, losing somebody. Once we recognize that, we approach the things in our life in a different way. And a lot of what we're going to talk about in this series is about having a totally different approach to the things that happen to us in our lives, and not looking at things in the light of this is a good thing and this is a bad thing, but really trying to get a good out of everything that happens to us.
Wonderful.
And again, that's an aspiration, and we recognize we are going to fall short, and we wouldn't be doing this series were it not for the fact that human beings fall short in these things, and it's a difficult thing to do. So it's something we aspire to and we aim towards.
Wonderful. We only have a couple minutes before the break, but I really wanted to mention, Sheikh, look, we don't want to undermine people that perhaps suffer from a medical condition. Of course, we would advise them to visit their medical practitioner and to seek the proper treatment, of course. But I think indeed the point also here is you don't want us or these people to leave the spiritual avenue uninvestigated. We have to connect with Allah and to strengthen our relationship with Allah in order to, as an answer to this. I mean, Islam in the end is the key to happiness. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I think that on the topic of joining between a spiritual cure and a medical cure, this is a well-established practice. And you only have to read a book like Zadul Ma'ad by Ibn al-Qayyim, which the provisions of the hereafter, I believe it's translated in English, and you see how Muslim scholars have advocated for hundreds and hundreds of years joining between seeking medical help and between a spiritual cure. And if you were to miss out the spiritual cure, all the medical help in the world wouldn't work.
Right, good point.
And likewise, if you were to ignore the medical help that Allah had given you, and Allah has put it there for you to use, you would also be turning away from the Sunnah. And that's because the Sunnah instructs us and indicates to us that we make use of what Allah has given us, but we recognize that the primary cure and the main medicine that we have to treat, especially those illnesses of the heart and illnesses of the mind, is the Book of Allah and is the instructions of Islam and the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Wonderful, wonderful, Brother Muhammad. We're going to take a short break, but perhaps in this next segment you can speak about some specific topics in episode titles that we will be addressing in the series for the viewers, inshallah.
I hope
and
so, inshallah.
You guys at home, I hope you're happy, smile, don't be sad, and stay tuned for more with Brother Muhammad Tim Humble.
Sometimes when the world's not on your side, you don't know where to run to, you don't know where to hide.
TV commercials motivate viewers into immediate action and to sway consumer loyalty from one brand or service to the other. That's why we're here for you, to help you sell your products and services by using creative ideas that bring life into your own TV commercial. Advertise your business and branded products and services on Huda TV. We will offer you fast-paced and energetic 30-second affordable TV spots. Advertise on Huda TV, acquire fresh customers and stay within your budget. For more info or to receive a quote, please send your inquiries to advert@Huda TV. Huda TV.
Sometimes when the world's not on your side, you don't know where to run to, you don't know where to hide.
Welcome back, you guys, to Don't Be Sad. I want you guys to smile and be happy. Don't be sad. I'm joined by the host of Power of Dhikr, as well as Do Your Part. You've seen him on other Islamic channels. We're very happy to have him back right here on Huda TV. Of course, Brother Muhammad Timhamba. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Muhammad.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Brother, before the break, you talked about Islam having a balance between medical answers to people being unhappy and depression and these sort of things, as well as a spiritual component working side by side. But many people perhaps would tell you, listen, the spiritual aspect is something that's not scientifically, it's not quantifiable. We know the effects of medicine, so I'm going to take my medicine. I'm going to consult my medical practitioner, my psychologist, who's going to give me medicine for my anxiety, my bipolar disorder, or my depression, whatever it may be. Now, how can we convince this person that indeed, in order to achieve happiness, if you do suffer from a medical, perhaps, illness, if that's the correct term to use, that indeed we have to have the spiritual component as well as the medical component together hand in hand?
I think it's also not only that, but even in a more general sense, not only those people who are suffering from medical disorders, but also those people generally who might seek a medical cure for their problems. I think in general we have to recognize that as Muslims we have a feature or a belief and a characteristic that really doesn't exist, certainly not in its full form, in anywhere other than Islam. And that is the very first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the believers as being, or described as a characteristic of the believers in the Quran at the very beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, those people who believe in the unseen. And of course the unseen covers a whole load of things. It covers belief in Allah, the angels, belief in those prophecies that we have yet to see come to fruition. It includes belief in those previous prophets that we never met. It includes belief in the scriptures of Allah that we didn't read. Many things. But this feature makes us different from other people. We believe in something more than the material, physical world that we see in front of our eyes. And one of the things that I think is wonderful about Islam is that we don't reject science. We don't necessarily, we are a very, as a nation, as an ummah, we're very much in tune with scientific thought. Islam has contributed a great deal to science and to medicine, but that hasn't been at the expense of spirituality.
Great point.
Which you have found, in all fairness, in Christianity, that Christianity turned to science at the expense of its belief and its spirituality, whereas Islam saw science as another thing that Allah has given us to be able to understand the physical and material world, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that by which we can understand the more important points of our soul, our spirituality, where we're heading, where we're going. And that, that sort of inner self is something that really there is no medical treatment for. And I really do believe this. There isn't really a medical treatment for that inner self. There's a lot of symptomatic treatment. So when someone becomes depressed, they give something to stop them remembering the depression they're feeling.
Symptomatic, as you say.
Islam is something that deals with it at the core, stops the cause of that depression, and that's something no medicine can do. So we join between the two, and hopefully by that we get the best of both worlds.
And Sheikh, in all fairness, I just want to go back briefly to your comments about the history of Islam embracing science, whereas we did see the Inquisition in Europe, which was killing scientists, and Galileo, the well-known, so this is a wonderful point that we embrace science, and that we want to investigate the scientific answers to our problems in order to support. Allah has given us as a bounty
no doubt.
to support. So that's a wonderful point.
I mean, we embrace it, but we have to also be clear that we embrace it with a condition, and that is when it doesn't contradict the texts of Islam. As for when it contradicts the texts of Islam, like for example evolution, then the texts of Islam for us are certain. And scientific theory, I mean, evolution is a theory. It comes and goes. I mean, if you had said at the time when everyone believed the earth was flat, if you said the earth was round, you would have been considered a scientific heretic.
You
had a heretical, anti-scientific belief.
Certainly.
A few years later, it's a totally different belief.
And today evolution remains a theory, because there's bones that Darwin said
it remains a theory which really, it's like when people jump on the bandwagon for something. It becomes so popular and so well known that to speak against it is considered to be blasphemy, almost according to these guys. And yet really when you look at it from a purely unemotional and very scientific point of view, you actually find there isn't a great deal of evidence that they have. It's very, very much theoretical, and it's very much an idea, and there isn't a great deal of evidence that they have. And that's interesting, that people are very unscientific about something that is so scientific.
Sheikh, you, Brother Muhammad, you mentioned a wonderful point. You said Islam, and is it a big claim perhaps for our non-Muslim viewers, that you said Islam is the key to that inner happiness, which cannot be achieved by any other means. Not that symptomatic happiness, which you said, but that deep core contentment in happiness. So how is that Islam can provide that? What is it so special about Islam, perhaps for our non-Muslim viewers, that how does Islam enable the human being to reach this true happiness?
I think the easiest way to explain this is to give the example, and it's an example many people give when explaining Islam to non-Muslims, and that is to give an example of something, a product that is made, like a car. The person who best knows what that car needs, the kind of oil it needs, the kind of things servicing it needs to keep that car running, the kind of care that it needs, the person who knows the best about what that needs is the manufacturer, the one that made it. And the same example is given in many different forms, that at the end of the day, our Creator knows better what is going to give us the peace and happiness that we crave for and we seek. And at the end of the day, everyone's seeking it, right? Muslim or non-Muslim.
Whether you know it or not, you're seeking it. I'm sorry to interrupt you, brother.
I mean, Muslim or non-Muslim, everyone's seeking to be happy. And at the end of the day, I think this is summarized in the statement of Allah in the Quran, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ. Doesn't the one who created know? The one who created us is the one who knows what we need. He knows the exact right things that are needed in order to bring us into a state of happiness and tranquility. And so it's only through His guidance that we can find that real, genuine peace and happiness, and not that sort of symbolic or sort of, topical happiness that people have, And I think this is something you see among many non-Muslims, and probably non-practicing Muslims as well, is that they feed their happiness by going out, let's buy something.
Yes.
And I'm only happy as long as that's something new for me. Then I have to buy something else to be happy, and then I have to have something else to be happy. And it's almost like they have to feed their happiness because it's not deep-rooted. Whereas when it comes to Islam, whether you have it or you don't, you're eternally and constantly happy, or at least that's what we're aiming for.
We have an expression that we say in the States where we say, it's like feeding a hungry alligator. In other words, it will never become full. Because a lot of youth in the United States and throughout the world, I suppose I can say, look, we're running to drink and to do drugs and to drink alcohol and to find girlfriends and boyfriends, and this happens on a weekly basis. We're waiting for Friday to come, we're waiting for the weekend so we can go party, and then Sunday comes, Monday comes, you're hungover, you're sad again, Friday comes again. It's this constant cycle. Do you believe that these youth can also benefit from Islam? Do you believe that these youth are actually looking for happiness in these things which only provide a short-lived kind of temporary joy?
Sure, I think that the people are either looking for one of two things. They're either trying to get that kind of temporary high. I mean, it's like drugs, right? When a person takes drugs, they get a temporary high. It might last 10 minutes, it might last half an hour, it might last an hour, but it doesn't last forever.
Right.
And so also there's that element of escapism, people trying to escape their life.
Yes.
I just want to forget about my life, I want to be somebody different. And Islam makes you the person that you are supposed to be, the kind of person you're supposed to be.
Brother, you embrace Islam also. I understand you are a revert to Islam. So somebody might say, I'm a free person, a non-Muslim might say, I'm a free person. Why would I want to confine myself to the rules of Islam? How would that make me happy? I already have the freedom to do what I want now. Why would I want to confine myself to these rules of fasting and praying? Why would that bring about happiness?
I think there are two things to say to this. The first is, I'm a very firm believer that you have to be a servant of something. And in other words, there is no such thing as absolute freedom for anybody. You're either a servant to your own desires, or you're a servant to the shaitan, to the devil, or you're a servant to your
intellect,
society, or to your intellect, or you're a servant to God. You have to be in a state of servitude to something. And for me, I'd far rather be a servant of God than to be a servant of my own desires, or a servant of my society, or a servant of the corrupt people. I'd far rather be a servant of God. And that's why, for me, this freedom, it's all there to mask a servitude.
Right.
And I mean, you can give many examples to that. You can give examples of things like how people dress, how people behave, what people do in their society. They are very much limited. And even when you talk about, for example, the situation of women in society, you see that there's something there that is called freedom. But in fact, it's the worst form of slavery.
Can we do a whole episode on this?
I think we probably will talk about it.
So much.
Because you're talking about something that is billed as freedom.
Right.
But it's the worst form of slavery.
Right.
And it's a slavery, it's that the woman is, in Western eyes, a slave to male desires.
Yes.
She sells products.
Yeah.
Through her beauty, through her skin, through her looks, she sells things to make men happy.
Yeah.
And that is servitude and slavery.
Yeah,
and so if you're going to be a slave, you'd rather be a slave of Allah than be a slave of these people and their desires. That's one aspect at least anyway.
And brother, perhaps during this series you can also speak a little bit about yourself and tell us how Islam has made you happy, and tell us a little bit about your personal story so the viewers can get to know you a little bit more, inshallah.
I hope so, inshallah.
Now we only have about a minute left. Where do you want to go in the next 2 or 3, 4 episodes? Give us the roadmap.
I think the most important thing right now is for us to establish that there is no problem and no difficulty that a Muslim will face, either as an individual or as a society, except that Islam gives an answer for it. That it doesn't exist. And I've found this throughout my life, that whatever problems and difficulties I've faced, when I've gone back to the Islamic sources, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I found in there an answer. There was no good except that our Prophet, peace be upon him, indicated to us how to achieve it and how to keep it. And no evil except that he warned us how to stay away from it and how to make it something that is permanently away from us. So we simply have to find that answer.
Well, that's a wonderful way to end the program. Brother Muhammad, I certainly appreciate your time. But actually, if I can sneak in a story, I knew a man that came to our Shaykh Kareem Abu Zayd. He said to him, Shaykh, I'm feeling very bad for the last 8 months. I've turned away from Allah. But alhamdulillah, now Allah guided me back and I'm praying again. You know what the Shaykh said? He said, well, there's nowhere else to turn. Allah, we have to always return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think this is a wonderful point, and I look forward to the next episode. And you guys don't go anywhere. You guys stay tuned to Huda TV and look out for Don't Be Sad. You guys be happy. Don't be sad with Brother Muhammad Tim Humble. Until next time, we leave you in the care of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sometimes when the world's not on your side, you don't know where to run to, you don't know where to hide. You gaze at the stars in the sky, at the mountains so high, through the tears in your eyes, looking for a reason to replace what is gone. Just remember that you are never alone. You are never alone. Just reach into your heart and Allah is always there. You are never alone. Through sorrow and through grief, through happiness and peace, you are never alone.